Good evening, friends. The sun is set, and I'm back with another tale from my collection. Now it's time to grab a snack. Dim the lights if you dare, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Crossover. Michael reached for another slice of pizza blindly. He loved this movie and did not want to take his eyes from the screen and chance missing even a few seconds. The pizza felt odd, and then he felt it start to wiggle in his hand. Looking down, he saw he had grabbed Tiffany's hand as she also grabbed for more pizza. She laughed. "I'm going to need those fingers back to eat with, you know." "Sorry," he said, and lifted her hand to kiss the back. "I wasn't paying attention." "I see that," she said, smiling as she reached down to grab another slice of pie. Michael grabbed another slice and started eating as he let himself get carried away in the movie again. Around him, he could hear his other friends eating as well, and no one said anything as they watched. On the screen, the campers were assembled around the fire, drinking, smoking, and roasting marshmallows on sticks. Just a bunch of friends on a weekend excursion for fun. The camera panned up to show an almost full moon peeking out from behind wispy clouds that looked like tendrils reaching down through the branches of the trees above. Then came the sound of a large stick snapping in the forest around them, and Michael heard Tiffany gasp next to him as one of the girls on screen gasped and looked around nervously. She knew what was coming. He knew what was coming, and in fact, all of them knew what was coming, as this was probably the 100th time they had gathered to watch the movie together. Each of them could recite the whole script, word for word, and tell you every detail of the movie as if they wrote and filmed it themselves. "Dude, now's not the time," Jeff said as one of the guys on the screen grabbed the hand of the girl to lead her to the tent. "Come on, baby," the man on screen said as he took her hand. "I have a knot in my leg and I need you to massage it out because it's killing me." "Yeah, in his third leg," Eric said at the same time another guy on screen said it to his girl. Laughing, he shoved a barbecue wing in his mouth and ripped the meat off, pulling the bone out to hold up symbolically. On screen and off, they all laughed and watched as the couple disappeared into a tent. A light came on in the tent, and their silhouettes could be seen undressing, giving a perfect view of just what was happening. The screen panned back to the others around the fire as the sounds of delight began to emanate from the tent. The other two couples got up and walked off into the woods in different directions, laughing and shaking their heads as one of the girls called out, "Have fun, you two." Michael felt Tiffany grab his hand on the arm of the chair as the scene shifted to show a psychopath leaning casually against a tree, watching the others walk off as the silhouettes of the romping couple filled the background. His face was covered by a loose cloth with eyeholes. She squeezed his hand hard when the killer moved his arm from behind the tree to reveal a sharpened metal pipe. They knew what was coming next. As the killer slowly walked toward the tent, Tammy squealed and sunk lower into the couch where she sat next to Jeff. She pulled him close and hid her face in his arm, peeking out with one eye. On screen, the killer ripped the flaps of the tent back to show the happy couple from behind as she rode her mount, oblivious to the intrusion. "Damn, look how young they looked back when this film was made compared to now," Tiffany said. For a moment, Michael's thoughts drifted back in time to when the movie was first made and realized they were all about the same age as the actors, and all of them had been young then. He wished he could go back to then. The pipe raised in the air, light glinting off the razor-sharpened end, as it plunged downward through her from behind to impale them both. Blood spattered the inside of the tent as if someone threw buckets of it around, and then the light went out. The killer allowed the tent flaps to close, as if nothing ever happened. As if on cue, as the tent flaps closed, a bright flash of light came through the side window of the room, followed by a loud crash of thunder, and the power went out, leaving the movie watchers in darkness. Michael reached out to pet his cat, who normally laid on his left armrest when he was watching television, but it was not there. Lightning and thunder must have scared it, he thought to himself. "Oh, man," Jeff said and leaned forward on the couch as the others all moaned in disapproval. "That sucks." The sound of a heavy thunderstorm could be heard outside the house. Heavy winds shrieked and howled as the shadows of trees flitted through the windows from the streetlights across the street. Michael leaned closer and looked out the window. "Looks like the power's only out on this side of the street," he said and grabbed more pizza. "I guess we can finish eating while we wait for the power to come back on." "No, the mood is ruined now," Eric said. "Come on, Susie. I got a knot in my leg I need you to massage because it's killing me." He stood up, pulling Susan with him. "Hey, Michael, you mind if we crash in your guest room tonight?" Eric asked. "I do not really want to drive home in this mess, and, I got a knot in my leg." They all laughed, and Michael told them to go right ahead, while offering the living room and the pull-out couch to Jeff and Tammy. Grabbing Tiffany by the hand, he led her off to the bedroom as well. Michael woke with a start. He was still sweaty and hot from his recent activity with Tiffany and realized he must have only dozed off for a few minutes. "Long enough to have that dream," he muttered to himself, and reached out to lay a hand on Tiffany's back, running his fingers along the soft creases of muscle. The dream was weird. He was watching the movie with his friends, noticing how young the actors looked and wishing he could return to that time when he dozed off momentarily. When he awoke in the dream, he was standing in the woods just outside the campsite in the movie. It was a dream within a dream. Looking around, it took a few minutes to realize where he was until he heard the campers speaking. It all seemed rather surreal, and he watched as the scene played out up to the point the killer began walking toward the tent. When the killer pulled back the tent flaps, Michael was standing beside him and looked down at the young couple. Looking back up to the killer, he reached out and grabbed the pipe as it began to plunge. "Dude, no," he said. "What kind of asshole kills him in mid-stride? How'd you like to die before you get off?" Michael ripped the pipe from the killer and slammed it into his head, knocking him out. As the tent flap closed, he woke. Michael sat up and pulled on his shorts. He needed to get something to drink and try to forget about the weird dream. He made his way to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of orange juice before sitting at the table to have a smoke. His mind was filled with thoughts of not only the dream, but also of being able to go back in time to when the movie was made. Of being young and fearless and having the boundless energy he once had. Tiffany came up behind him and put her hands on his shoulders, leaning down to kiss him. "You couldn't sleep either, huh?" he asked. "No, I woke up thinking about the movie," she said. "It sucked having it stop like that." Finishing his juice, Michael stubbed out the cigarette and stood to embrace Tiffany. He took her hand and led her through the darkened living room to the hall where the bedroom was. They could hear Jeff and Tammy quietly kissing and cuddling. As they turned the corner into the hall, Eric and Susan were coming out of the hall and the group bumped into each other. "You guys couldn't sleep either, huh?" Eric asked. "Nah, it was too quiet without the power on," Michael said. "I can hear crickets farting in the dark." "That would be Jeff," Tammy said, giggling. They turned to the sound and the lights came on at that moment. Tammy was leaning on the back of the couch looking at them with her breasts resting on the back of the couch. She looked down, smiled blushingly, and pulled back to allow them to slip down behind the couch. "Nice," Eric said, as Susan smacked his bottom. "What? I just said they were nice." The television came back on, and the movie continued, as if it had never been off. "That's weird," Michael said. "I've never had it come back on by itself before." "So who's up to finish the movie?" Jeff asked, and propped himself up to watch. They all assumed their seats to resume watching the movie. After a moment, Michael paused the movie and looked around at his friends. "Hey, didn't the power go off right after you killed the couple in the tent?" he asked. "No, he just stepped out from behind the tree," Tiffany said, and the others agreed with her. Hitting play, Michael wondered about this, and then remembered the dream, and wondered if he had not gotten mixed up somehow. He had seen this movie so many times that he could literally begin watching it at any point, and know just where he was. He allowed himself to relax and settled back to watch. Now he was getting sleepy. On screen, the killer ripped the flaps of the tent back to show the happy couple from behind as she rode her mount, oblivious to the intrusion. "Damn, look how young they looked back when this film was made compared to now," Tiffany said. For a moment, Michael's thoughts drifted back in time to when the movie was first made, and all of them had been young then. He was standing beside the killer and looked down at the young couple. Looking back up to the killer, he reached out and grabbed the pipe as it began to plunge. "Dude, no," he said. "What kind of asshole kills in mid-stride? How'd you like to die before you get off?" Michael ripped the pipe from the killer and slammed it into his head, knocking him out. As the tent flap closed, he woke and sat up. Looking around the room, Michael noticed the television was off and all of his friends were looking at him. He wondered what happened while he was dozing. "Dude, what the hell was that?" Jeff asked. "Yeah," Susan chimed in. "It looked like a younger version of you. That never happened in the movie before." Michael looked at them in confusion. While the dream had felt real, he had no idea how they'd seen his dream or what they saw. "What do you mean?" he asked, petting his cat. "This shit is just too freaky for me," Tammy said and hid beneath the blanket she shared with Jeff. They could see her curling into a ball beside him. "Who turned the television off?" Michael asked, looking at Tiffany. The remotes were resting on the armrest between them. "Tiffany?" "No, I was watching just like everyone else," she said. "Except, just as the killer was walking up, I heard you snore and looked over. Then everything went quiet." "You did not see the younger version of Michael walk into the movie and stop the killer?" Susan asked. Tiffany shook her head. Eric downed the last of his beer and stood up, taking Susan by the hand. "Okay, guys, I think we're all just tired and got a little messed up by the storm. We are going to bed and we'll see you guys in the morning. Sweet dreams." Michael watched as Eric and Susan headed off for the spare room. Jeff was still sitting up on the couch, gently rubbing Tammy's back as she curled next to him. "I think Eric is right," Tiffany said. "The storm messed up the movie for us tonight and got us all out of sync. Let's just go to bed and try this again another time." Michael allowed himself to be led to bed, turning off the living room light as they left. Jeff called out "good night" as they were leaving the room, and he could hear him comforting Tammy. Sleep did not come easily as Michael relived the dream. It felt so real, as if he had actually somehow transcended the television and made his way into the movie world. He remembered the feeling of being young again, a feeling lost to him many years in the past, as his aging body slowed to the point that just being awake felt like the end of a long, hard day. He was only in his mid-50s, but he assumed he had used it all up when he was younger. His sleep was fitful, and when the sun peeked in the window to wake him, he did not want to get up. Reaching behind, he gently ran his hand over Tiffany's hip, marveling at the softness and warmth. She snuggled back against him, and he reached further to hug her to his back. He liked having her close when he woke up. But the insane need for relief drove him to flee the bed for the bathroom before his bladder burst. Relieving himself, he was saddened at the prospect that the pleasure he felt from voiding might be the best he felt all day. Stumbling from the bathroom, he tossed the hand towel to the laundry and headed for the kitchen. Right now, he needed coffee and cigarettes to get him sufficiently stimulated to face the day. Jeff and Tammy were finishing up breakfast when he walked in. He greeted them with a surly grunt as he headed for the coffee pot to liberate some of the life-giving nectar. Cream and sugar were added without thought, and he stirred with one hand as he lit a smoke with the other. Taking his first drag, he sipped at the coffee and breathed a sigh. That was what he needed. Turning around, he waved to Jeff and Tammy as they headed out the door to the world beyond. It was Sunday, and he had no place to be. He figured Eric and Susan were probably still sleeping like Tiffany, and he should have at least the next hour to himself to just sit and wake up and think. Last night had been bizarre. First the power outage, then the dream, followed by the power coming back on, and a second, almost exact dream. It was weird. He had never had his television turn back on after the power loss before, nor the DVD player. Then it was back off after the second dream, as if it had never been on to start with. Had they actually gotten back up and watched television after going to bed? Or had the awakening been part of his original dream within a dream? He went over it slowly in his head, trying to make sense of it. Reality was the power outage and going to bed. This morning was waking up from that, which places everything between those 2 points in time as a dream and dreams within dreams. He touched the tip of his cigarette against his forearm to see if he was really awake, flinching immediately from the pain. He looked at the now red spot on his arm. Okay, so far so good. Really awake now. He took a drag from the smoke. In his first dream, he was watching the movie with his friends. Okay, a mirror on reality. Then he dozed off and found himself in the movie taking the pipe from the killer. Dream within a dream. Then he woke and got some orange juice. Power came on. They watched the movie. He dozed off. He was in the movie again, except this time when he woke, everyone was aware what happened. Then he went back to bed. That was it. It was all a dream, because when he woke up to get the orange juice, he was waking up from a dream within a dream, and he never woke a second time to come back to reality. That means when he dozed off watching the movie the second time, it was another dream within a dream, which he woke from to everyone's confusion and went back to bed to wake this morning. He sat back and breathed a sigh of relief, chuckling to himself. He had experienced complicated dreams in the past, but never like this. It was a whole new level of weird for him. Getting up to get another cup of coffee, his mind felt a little clearer, and there was a sense of relief that he was able to figure it out. Sitting again at the table, he lit another cigarette and watched the smoke drifting slowly in a sunbeam reflected from the skylight above. Now that he had figured the dream out, he started to pick it apart. First were the corny lines he said to the killer. Who would even think to say something like that at such a time? It gave the killer plenty of time to turn his attention to him instead, as if a psycho was really going to give a damn what he thought. And then there was the fact that it was a movie. Movies are not real life. They're essentially plays on a stage with the cameraman and producers and directors right there. Sure, good camera work and editing makes it look real, but it's all make-believe, and they work hard to make it look real. Which brought him to his second point. Why had not anyone yelled, "Cut!" when he intruded into the scene, and then cuss him out for ruining their work? He held a hand over his mouth to keep from laughing out loud and waking Tiffany and the others. Now that he had it all sorted out, it was so ridiculous he could not fathom how he even thought any part of it was real. It felt real, but sometimes dreams feel real. Crushing out his smoke, he closed his eyes and leaned back in the chair to relax. Suddenly, he felt himself enveloped in arms and cloth as Tiffany came up from behind to kiss his cheek. "Good morning," she said. "Sleep well?" "Not too bad," he said. "Had some crazy dreams, but not too bad, and I feel pretty rested." "That's good," she said, and padded over to get herself a cup of coffee. Tiffany sat at the table beside him. He saw she was wearing one of his larger shirts and nothing underneath. She had only buttoned one of the mid-buttons, so the shirt hung open, allowing him to gaze upon everything underneath. She looked especially inviting this morning, and he considered taking her back to bed. "Things got pretty freaky last night," Tiffany said. What do you mean? He asked as he leaned over to nuzzle her through the shirt. The movie, she continued. I don't ever remember there being a director's cut or deleted scene when someone interrupted the first kill like that. And it was freaky how much the guy looked like you, the way I remember you from years ago. Part 2. Michael sat back in his recliner next to Tiffany to watch the movie with the gang. It was several weeks since their last gathering, when everything was interrupted by the power outage. All had agreed that since that night had turned out so freaky, tonight they would view another of their favorite old movies. Did somebody check the weather forecast for tonight to make sure there would be no more freaky storms? Tammy asked as she dug into the bowl of fried rice in her lap. Yeah, I made sure, Eric said through a mouthful of sesame chicken. We have clear sailing all the way through Monday and beyond. Everyone laughed, but Michael could tell they were a bit nervous. All of them had avoided getting together to watch movies for the past several weeks since that night. Not that the evenings weren't planned as usual, they were. But each Saturday night, one couple or the other had called out and said they were not up for it. Tonight, finally, they were back to normal. I think it was a great idea to change the movie and go with something not as intense for our first get back together, Susan said. I just not have felt right since that night. But I love you all and missed you. Aww, Tammy said as she got up to hug Susan. I missed you too, sugar. Tiffany got up to join in the hug as well, and the three of them stood in the middle of the living room cooing at each other like long-lost hens. All right, you guys, Jeff said, looking up where they stood in front of him. All these sweet asses in my face is breaking my concentration and making me forget about my food. Everyone laughed, and the girls parted to return to their seats. Okay, Tammy said. We do not want to get between you and your food. God knows you're grumpy enough as it is. Yeah, Jeff said, and shoved another bite of shrimp fried rice in his mouth. I got to eat. Michael bit a fried butterfly shrimp off clean at the tail and closed his eyes to enjoy it. Shrimp were a favorite of his, and he did not get them as often as he would like. The place they got the food from tonight was one of his favorites for shrimp, as they used rice flour beer batter instead of panko. He much preferred the smooth texture of rice flour over gritty breadcrumbs. The DVD was playing, but the movie had not yet started. By mutual agreement, they always let the credits, previews, and FBI warnings play instead of passing them up, so they could be mostly done eating when the movie really got going. A few times in the past, food was left uneaten because the gory part of the movie came too soon. Not that it would have bothered Jeff and Eric. They actually reveled in the gory parts when they were eating, making the others queasy as they slurped noodles during evisceration scenes and such. To them, crunching into a crusty bite of rare beef Wellington while a werewolf was eating someone was the height of fun. None of them could explain what happened on that Saturday night, no matter how they tried to reason it out. They even went back and watched the movie during the day, together and individually, but the incident never repeated. It was as if it was all a mutual waking dream. The movie got going, and Michael watched as the amateur paranormal investigators set up their cameras and equipment to try and prove that the place they were checking out was indeed haunted. There were actually several of this type of movie, and he had chosen this one because there was no blood or gore. There would be a lot of frights, unexpected bumps in the night, and terrified running from nothing, but no actual danger to the characters in the movie. For Michael, this was important, as the memory was almost unbearable. He had come away from that night believing it was just dreams within dreams, only to have the rest of them thrust him back into it head first. For a while, he didn't know how to cope with the events and the unknowing. Tiffany broke the silence while they ate. Hey guys, if I should happen to doze off during the movie, please just let me catch a nap. I had a really busy day today. I did not mean to be rude, I'm just really tired. They all agreed and told her that was fine. They enjoyed her company. If she needed a little rest, they would be there when she woke up. This movie was a lost footage production based on a supposed real experience of which the cameras had been abandoned and the film crew never found. It was marketed as a missing person mystery. Anyone with any sense would know it was not real, if for no other reason than the fact that the police would not have released the footage of an open case. Therefore, the public, while maybe getting to see a few cuts from the footage in news articles, would not have been required to pay to see it at the theaters. It was all about the money, just like every movie. The filmmaker's goal was to make it believable enough for one to suspend disbelief long enough to enjoy the film. In that respect, this one was okay. Michael's thoughts returned to the other movie in their last viewing. Upon the realization the events had indeed occurred, his mind would not let it go. Despite being in agreement with everyone that it had been a mass hallucination, something deep inside said it was not. The lights were low and everyone was pretty much done eating as the movie started to get into the more interesting parts. The hour in the movie was growing late, and the investigators had already heard several bumps in the night. Tensions were rising among the camera crew and the audience too, as the music deepened and became slower. Michael was not looking at the movie though. He was watching Jeff as he finished eating a teriyaki chicken kebab and stared at the pointed stick in his hand. He seemed to get an idea and reached into his plate to grab a whole sautéed mushroom. Impaling the mushroom on the stick, he looked up to the rest of them. "We interrupt this movie for the following important announcement," Jeff said, holding up the impaled mushroom and bouncing it across in front of him. "Mario, help me!" he said in a high voice and plopped the mushroom into his mouth. "That is all." Everyone laughed at his joke and turned back to the television in time to see a large shadow descend a stairwell toward the investigators. A scream could be heard from a female investigator as she ran away, and the camera angle switched to her camera as she ran. The woman kept looking into the camera and behind her as she described what she thought was chasing her. The viewer could not tell where she was running to, as the camera was always pointed in her face as if she was wearing it on a body harness. The panic was evident on her face. Tears streamed from her eyes and her nose began to run as she sobbed about hearing the footsteps closing behind her. The night was fairly cold as her breath came out in clouds of steam. In the background, you could hear one of the guys with her yelling for her to stop and tell him what happened. He called her name several times. Then she stopped suddenly, screamed, and swiped at something in front of her, as if to push it away. Her hands hit the camera, making it fall to the ground. She could be seen running away from the camera into the darkness, screaming as it lay still recording on the leaves within a defoliated gathering of bushes. Moments later, someone ran by the falling camera, not realizing it was there. They were following the woman and could be heard to call her name. Then the camera view switched to the man following the woman. He also seemed to be wearing his camera on a body harness, and it was focused on his face. He was peering into the darkness, looking for the woman, but she had disappeared and was quiet now. Then he spun around quickly as someone could be heard running in the leaves behind him, and the camera angle switched back to the woman's camera. Someone had picked it up. This person was holding the camera low in their right hand and running away from where the others were. There was someone else running beside them. They made their way across a large grassy field to a stone wall, and it was obvious they climbed over it. The camera stopped for a moment and looked back toward where they came from over the wall. In the distance, a man could be heard calling for the woman as his flashlight moved through the woods around the house they were investigating. The house was lit up on every floor, and someone could be seen standing on the front porch smoking a cigarette. Then the camera turned toward the darkness and moved toward a small stone building. "Are you guys seeing this shit too?" Eric asked. "Nobody picked up the woman's camera the last time I watched this movie." "Yeah, I know," Tammy said in a voice that betrayed her fear. "This is some freaky shit." "Michael, what do you think about this?" Jeff asked, and looked over to see Michael and Tiffany were asleep in the love seat together. "Let them sleep," Susan said. "Remember Tiff asking us to let her sleep because they had a hard day?" "Yeah, you're right, Susie," Eric said and turned back to watch the television. The person carrying the camera reached out and opened a thick wooden door on the small stone building. The hinges made a loud creaking sound like one would hear in a dungeon. The person with them went in first, and they followed, closing the door and securing it with a bolt to prevent others coming in behind them. "Oh my God," Tammy said as the camera turned to face the one carrying it. "That looks just like the guy we saw a few weeks ago, like a younger Michael." "Shh," Jeff said and leaned forward to hear better. The person in the camera reached out to wipe the lens and then set the camera on a shelf or something so they could sit comfortably in front of it. "Okay, I know you're watching the movie and thinking this is some freaky shit," young Michael said. Michael's friends watching the movie could only stare in disbelief. They had no idea what was happening or how it was even possible. "A couple weeks ago when the storm took out the power, I dreamt I was in the movie we were watching when I fell asleep watching it. At least, I thought I dreamt it, until you all told me how you saw what I saw." Young Michael paused. "I don't know how it works, but I know if you fall asleep in front of a movie, you can actually enter the movie. At first, I thought it was just me, and that I had some special kind of power or something, but I was wrong. After talking to Tiffany about it, and getting her past thinking I was just crazy, I showed her. Then we tried an experiment together and found if we hold hands, we can enter and be in the movie together." Everyone looked over at Michael and Tiffany where they slept. Tammy gasped loudly. They were indeed holding hands as they slept. "I learned a lot of things that I need to explain to you guys," young Michael said seriously. "First thing is, if you enter the movie, it's not just a set where the movie's being filmed. There are no film crews, lighting, or anything. Somehow, and I don't know how, once a movie's made, its reality is set. It actually happens in some form or another. I say that because entering a movie changes the dynamic somehow. Like when I prevented the girl from getting killed, she was still killed later on as they slept when the killer recovered. I watched from a safe distance. Call it an alternate dimension or parallel reality or whatever, how it is seen is how it really is. You might have noticed that I look a lot younger." He paused and reached out to someone. "Just look at Tiffany now. Is she not young and gorgeous?" Tiffany smiled and waved at the camera. "Now I think what happened is we assumed the age we were when the movie was created, or we first saw it. Not really sure. But we are much younger now, and I have the strength I remember when I was this age. It's amazing." Young Michael sat back and seemed to be lost in thought for a few moments. Then he smiled, grabbed Tiffany's hand, and looked again at the camera. "When I was experimenting with it, I found you come back to reality when you wake up, so I set alarms to wake up. But I have more questions that need to be answered, and I wanted to share this with you all first. I guess that's all I can tell you about this. We don't know what happens if we leave the boundary of the set in the movie. Is the rest of the world outside the set back to normal, and we revert back home as we would if we woke up now?" He paused. "Or is the rest of the world as it was when the movie was made, and we will just blend in and begin living our lives from this new beginning? Or will we find ourselves in our old bodies, as they were in this time, with a memory of growing up and resetting or something like that? I don't know, but we're going to find out." With that, Michael and Tiffany opened up the door and stepped out into the night, fading into the darkness. As the group of friends watched, one of the investigators from the movie came into the room and grabbed the camera. He took the camera back to the house, and the movie continued as normal. Everyone looked around at the others in disbelief. What had they just seen? Susan got up and tried to wake Tiffany and Michael. She tried several times, and then reached under their chins to feel for a pulse. Turning back to the others, she announced, "They're dead." Thank you for spending your time with me. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I'll be sure to join the conversation. That's all for now, but I'll be back again soon with another story. just for you. Until then, sleep well.